There it is. This is week 3 of our children's Bible stories for adults. So what do you think so far? Muy bueno. Muy bien. Gracias. So the first week, of course, we did the Prodigal Son. And did you learn anything new in that one? So the story is not just about the son. It's more about the brother. So what was the deal with the brother?
He felt that, wow, I did all the good. I think I'm entitled to more than he is, and he's the one that backslid, and
He was never praised either.
and you're giving him everything.
Right.
That wasn't the right way to look at it.
Right. So the unforgiveness and no mercy. And of course, being a parable, Jesus had a deeper story that he was sharing there. And so as we go through these children's Bible stories, you're going to see more and more of those parables. They're going to be coming out. Well, of course, now we're in the Christmas season. So being in the Christmas season, I've got to tell you some Christmas stories. And these are always eye openers because we think we know the Christmas story because we have heard it so many times. But like I've told you before, Satan has a way of getting his fingers on everything. And even though the story may not have changed, the emphasis that's in that story does get changed. And so what we're going to be doing over the next several weeks leading up to Christmas is we're going to bring the focus back to where it would have been in that first century when Jesus shows up on the scene. So as we talk about these children's stories, I'm always going to start with the actual children's story. And then from there, move into the part that, as Paul Harvey would say, it's the rest of the story. So I don't know if many of y'all even remember Paul Harvey anymore. I think maybe 5 of y'all do. Yeah. So what we're going to be talking about today is the 3 wise men. So as we look at the nativity, this is a pretty common scene. So if you look at all of the characters that are in that picture there, you see pretty much everybody that you would see in a nativity scene that's out there in front of the other churches or post office or whatever. I don't even know if the post office has a nativity scene anymore, but you see him out there. There is one character that's missing in this picture. Who is it? Oh, there may have been a camel there. May have been a camel. The angel. Isn't there usually an angel in the nativity scenes? Yeah, so I don't have an angel in this one. But we see all the regular characters. We see the shepherds. We see, of course, Mary and Joseph and Jesus. And we see the wise men over there with their gifts. Of course, being in a barn, you got to have the barn animals that are there also. So if you have only heard this story on TV or from a children's book, forget what you know, because it's probably not right. It's not the way it went. So we know that when Jesus was born, that there were several important people that were involved. Of course, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus were there. But who else really showed up that night? That's what we need to talk about. So the 3 wise men. Stacy asked me if it was a Wise Men South Park Christmas. I'm like, well, it kind of looks South Park, I guess. I don't know. So this week that we're going to look at these guys. So whether you know it as the 3 wise men or the 3 kings or the Magi, the story comes from the book of Matthew, chapter 2. And it's one that everyone has heard of in some form or another. So during the time when Jesus was born, there was a very mean king who ruled the land. His name was King Herod. Remember his name because we're going to talk about him later. Soon after Jesus was born, wise men were traveling on their camels. There's the camels. One night, they noticed a very strange star in the sky. They knew that this star meant that the King of the Jews, the one who would save the world, had been born. When the mean king, what was his name again? Herod, heard this, he got very worried. He called a meeting with all the other important people in the area and asked them where this special baby had been born. The people replied, in Bethlehem. They knew this because they heard that one day a special person would come from there and take care of all the people. Then King Herod called the wise men to a secret meeting, and they found out from them exactly where they saw the star. He then told them, go and find this child. As soon as you find him, tell me so that I can go and worship him. After they had spoken to the king, the wise men left to find the baby. They didn't know exactly where the baby was, but at night they followed the star in the east. They followed the star until it hung right over the very place where Jesus was. When they finally had arrived, they were very excited and happy. They found Jesus lying in Mary's arms, and they bowed down and they worshiped him. They opened the gifts they had brought Jesus, and the gifts were gold and frankincense and myrrh. These were very expensive gifts. These were the gifts that you would give to a king, not a baby. Mary thanked them for bringing the gifts for Jesus, and the wise men went to find a place to sleep for the night. As the wise men slept, they each had the same dream. They were not to go back and tell King Herod where they found Jesus. King Herod didn't want to find Jesus to worship him. Instead, he wanted to kill him because he was jealous that this baby would someday be better than him. So the wise men went home another way so that Herod would not know where they had come from. They also decided that they would not tell King Herod anything about what they had seen. When the wise men had left, an angel appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, the angel said. Take Jesus and Mary and run away to Egypt. Stay there until I come to you again, because Herod is going to search for Jesus to kill him. Joseph immediately got up and woke Mary. She gently picked up Jesus so he wouldn't wake from his sleep. They left in the middle of the night for Egypt so no one would see them. They were safe in Egypt, and after King Herod died, an angel appeared to Joseph and told him he could go to a place called Nazareth, and that's where Jesus grew up. So that's the kid's story. Now, the whole Christmas story isn't found in one place in the Bible. It's actually picked up from several different places, and you can put it together to make the whole story. So we've got some different things that happen. We see the Annunciation in Luke chapter 1, and we're actually going to be talking about the Annunciation the week after next, maybe next week. I'm not sure if we're going to go Old Testament again next week or not, or just stick with Christmas stories. We've got the birth, which is accounted in Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7, Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. We've got the shepherds and the angels. That's Luke chapter 2, verses 8 through 21. We've got the wise men, Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Who Jesus is, we get from John 1, verses 1 through 18. And then the idea about Jesus being the good news and the gospel, that comes from Mark chapter 1, verses 14 and 15. So you take all these pieces and put them together, that gives us the Christmas story. Now, remember that if you try to read the Bible as a book, it can be confusing because, number one, all of the books in the Bible don't come in the right order. They're not in the order that they were written. They're in the order that has been accepted by tradition over thousands of years. So by the time we get to Jesus showing up, then we get the New Testament, okay? That's the part of the Bible that talks about Jesus and the church and the role of the church in the world. Now, when you read the first four books of the New Testament, you've got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, And those seem to be repeats. So you finish the book of Matthew and you start over in Mark and you're like, wait a minute, I read this before. Well, when you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those are 4 eyewitness accounts from 4 different perspectives. So it's like if there was a wreck and the police have to interview all the witnesses. They don't just interview one witness. They want to interview many witnesses so that they can try to get more pieces of the story, knowing that different things are important to different people. So as you go through Matthew and Mark and Luke and John, these 4 accounts of Jesus all come from different perspectives. So it may look the same, but there are slight differences because different things were brought out by the different writers under the compulsion of the Holy Spirit. At the same time, there's different audiences. So some of those books were written for a Jewish audience. Some of them were written for a Greek audience. Some of them were written with a Hebrew perspective. Some were written with a Roman perspective. Some were written about the physical things. Some were written about the spiritual things. And so because of that, you can't just gloss over Mark and Luke and John because you already read Matthew, okay? You have to focus on each of those parts. So for some reason, the book of Luke didn't give the story of the wise men, but the book of Mark did. At the same time, the book of Mark didn't put as much emphasis on the birth of Jesus, but the book of Luke did. So we have to put those together to get the whole story. So the Old Testament gave many, many clues of what to look for. In Genesis 22:18, it tells us that the whole world would be blessed by Abraham's descendant. So that's actually the first clue that there is going to be someone special that's born. That's not just a regular person, okay? We see it again in Numbers 24:17. It says that this special person is going to come out of the line of Jacob. Then in Isaiah 11 and in Samuel 7, it gets more specific. It's going to come out of the line of King David, okay? We see in Micah chapter 5 that this special child is going to be born in Bethlehem. We see in Isaiah chapter 7 that this baby is going to be born from a virgin. And then in Psalm 72, we see that this baby is going to be worshiped by shepherds and by kings. We see that there's going to be baby boys killed because of him in Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 15. And we see that God is going to call his son out of Egypt. And that we see in Hosea chapter 11, verse 1. There's actually 47 more prophecies in the Old Testament that is very, very accurate about who Jesus is and what Jesus did. So I gave you a website to look at there. It's got 55 prophecies of the Old Testament that came true because of Jesus's birth. Okay, cool stuff. All right, so let's go to the real story. So the real story actually comes from Matthew chapter 2. I'm going to read this verse out of the New Living Translation. So Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." So as we look in Matthew, we see that there's already some differences here that wasn't in the children's story. First of all, it says some wise men from eastern lands. It didn't say kings, and it didn't say 3. Where do we get the 3 from? It's not in the Bible. So where do we get 3 wise men?
The Trinity.
You're thinking too churchy.
Because the 3 gifts.
Yeah, 3 gifts. So we just assume that since there's 3 gifts, there must be 3 kings, right? So that's where traditionally 3 comes from. And the second thing we see here is it says, we saw his star as it rose, and we've come to worship him. Okay, it does not say we followed his star. That's something that came out of tradition and not out of scripture. Okay, so who were these wise men? So Matthew chapter 2 verse 1 has been translated many different ways over the years. So the Greek word that's here is actually the word Magi. And because we don't have any of these guys in England, Bible translated into English, or in America, the word had to be adjusted into something that we would understand, something that the English speaking people could relate to. So wise men is closest. First it was kings, but then it was wise men. Other terms could be royal advisors, astrologers, or even magicians. So when you think of these magi, we need to really talk about this guy. Who's that guy? Okay, it's not Herod. Anybody seen Aladdin? That's Jafar. Okay, this is Jafar from the Disney film Aladdin. And the deal with Jafar is that he was the royal vizier. Okay, he was the advisor to the king. And anytime the king needed to make any kind of decision, he would go to Jafar. Now, so we're talking about a vizier. We're talking about one of these guys, except with the 3 kings, we're talking about the good kind, not the evil kind, like Jafar was. I knew there had to be at least one person who knew who this was. So thank you, Blake.
That was like the only Disney movie I liked.
Oh, okay. All right. So the word magi actually means learned one. Okay. And so in order to know who these magi were, you actually need to look back in the Old Testament to the story of Daniel. Okay. So there's a whole book in the Old Testament called Daniel. It's really cool. We will study it sometime because there's a lot of really neat stuff in there that not only foretold what we now know of as history, but it also points to Revelation and things that we need to look at the end times. So Daniel's a really cool book. So Daniel was a Jewish boy who was kidnapped by the Babylonians around 605 BC. So this is 600 years before Jesus was even born. After saving Babylon by rightly interpreting the king Nebuchadnezzar's dream, long story short, he got promoted to chief or lord over all the magi of the land. Okay, so Daniel's a Jewish boy. And now he is in charge of the school that teaches the Magi. He's going to do some interesting teaching. In this position, he actually had the opportunity to teach Jewish history and Jewish prophecy to these Arab wise men. Okay, so now that sets the stage. More on this story on a different Sunday. Got a whole Sunday just for Daniel. Now, so by the time we get to Jesus's birth, these magi would have had all of the Hebrew prophecies taught to them by the magi that came before them, all the way back 600 years earlier to Daniel. These Magi were the earliest scientists. They were also alchemists, the earliest chemists. They were also the earliest pharmacists, developing medicines for people to take when they were ill. But the biggest thing that they studied was astrology. Astrology is different than astronomy. Astronomy is the science of stars and planets and what they're made of. Astrology doesn't do that. Astrology focuses just on the motion of the stars, the moon, the sun, the planets. And by looking at those motions, try to figure out how that affects people, how that affected history in the past, how that affects things that are happening right now, and using those signs in the sky to predict the future. Okay? Astrologers, not astronomers. It is different. Don't call an astronomer an astrologer. They will be upset at you. Okay? Now, so when these astrologers saw this in the sky, it meant something really special to them. So let me point out what we've got here. This constellation up there at the top, that's the constellation Leo. We see the star Regulus, that's the front paw of that lion. We see Jupiter, which is a very bright star in the sky, but it's not a star. We now know it as what? A planet. Well, the word planet just means wandering star, because it doesn't move like the rest of the stars do. They didn't know why, because remember, they're not astronomers. They just knew that it moved different. So it was a planet, a wandering star. Okay. We also have Mars, another wandering star. And we've got Venus, it's a very important wandering star. And we've got the moon. So all of these things together are moving in a certain way in the sky. So here's what it meant to them. The king planet, Jupiter, was rising in the constellation of Leo. Now we know that Leo is the lion, right? Leo the lion. And the lion is also known as the blank of the beasts. What is it? King of the beasts. Okay, so that's something else royal. And then the front paw is Regulus, the star Regulus, and Regulus is the king's star. That's where we get the word regal from. Regal, star. Okay, so that is the king's star. Then we've got Venus. Venus is known as the bright and morning star. It's rising in the crest of the new moon. And when you have a new moon, that's a signal or a symbol that there's change coming. Venus was overtaking Mars. Mars is the god of war, and Venus is taking it over. The next several months, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Regulus are all going to converge. Now, to us, you're like, so what? But remember, these astrologers look for signs in the sky. They've got all of this royalty in the sky happening in one place. They knew something big was coming. And had it not been for the teaching of Daniel, they would not have known what the big thing was that's coming. We've got a new king bringing peace that will become the king of all kings. That's what these signs meant to the Magi. So now the question is, where? We see that it's going to happen, but we don't know where. it's going to happen. A little bit later, they saw another sign in the sky. The moon, again, the symbol of this new change, is now found in the belly of Virgo. And the constellation Virgo is the Virgin. So that means that this new king that's going to bring peace and be king of all kings is going to be born, not made. And it's going to be born not in the normal way, but from a virgin. Now, knowing the stories that Daniel taught them, the prophecy in Isaiah 7:11 that said that he would be born of a virgin, that gave them another clue that this is going to happen in the land of the Hebrews, in Daniel's homeland. And so they set off. These are the signs in the sky that were seen about 3 BC. And they start the entourage all the way to the capital of Israel, Jerusalem. And that's where we pick up the story with them going into Herod's court and saying, where are we going to find this newborn king? That's the backstory that you didn't know. Okay. Now, why do we say that there were 3 kings? 3 gifts. We're going to talk more about the gifts at the end. Travel was long and it was very hard in those days. The trip from the Far East would have taken months. So 3 men on camels wouldn't have made it very far because they would have run out of food, supplies, and they would have had no protection while they were traveling. They would need these supplies, food, tents, valuables, livestock, attendants, bodyguards, and an army in order to protect them. Because from where they started to where they were going, they were crossing many borders. And anybody seeing, a bunch of rich people walking through town, they're going to be targets. They're going to be targets for robbers. And they're also going to be targets for other armies, thinking that this might be some sort of invading scouting party or something coming in. These men were sent by their respective kings. And so they would have been sent with valuables to present to the king of a country. So this wasn't these 3 wandering guys on camels. This was a huge entourage. Okay. It could be dozens or maybe hundreds of people that are all traveling together with the Magi, making their way to Jerusalem. Now you're going to see it's getting a little crowded around the manger, right? It's not what we see at the nativity scene. Now, imagine what the people of Jerusalem would have thought. Jerusalem at the time was behind a heavily fortified wall. So nobody comes in just marching into town. This is like what we see in the old England days, all of the cities were behind walls. The village was, there was outsiders that were farming lands, but anytime any danger came, what did they do? They all run inside the gates, they shut up the gates, all of the archers and everybody are on top, and they're ready to take out whatever threat is coming their way. So now we've got these hundreds of armed people that are heading straight toward Jerusalem. Maybe that's another reason why the Bible tells us that Herod and the people of Jerusalem were deeply concerned. We've got an army outside the wall, and they want in. Now, Herod would have been deeply troubled here. He wasn't the rightful king of the Jews. He wasn't born in the line of King David, who was the first anointed king of the Jews. He was appointed instead by Rome. And right now, Rome is not a very popular place to be from if you're in Jerusalem. It looked like that he might be replaced by this one who they called born king of the Jews. It also appeared that there was an army there ready to force him off the throne. And it appeared that this new king would have financial backing of other countries. He also knew the prophecies because he was Jewish. All of these things were stacked against Herod. And so when these Magi come to him saying, we want to go worship the one who was born king of the Jews, he's a little upset. Okay. So when did the Magi finally catch up with Jesus? Matthew chapter 2, verses 9 through 11. If you read it very carefully, it said that the Magi came to the house, and there they found the child Jesus in the arms of Mary. And they presented them with 3 gifts. So it took them some time to travel to Jerusalem. Estimates are, with this caravan and everything, anywhere between 70 and 120 days to get there. It could have been even longer, depending on how far east these wise men started.
Do they know how far you, I mean, do they know which countries?
So you have to start putting history and other historical writings into play here. We really don't get it from scripture. But if you look at the time of Jesus's birth, what countries had royal viziers that came from this school of Magus, which were these trained to know astrology and all of that stuff. It could be as far east as Pakistan and India, which is why if you look at some of the traditional Roman Catholic paintings, you can look at the clothing that are worn by the kings, and you'll see that some of them have like Oriental clothing. And that comes from how far east they may have come. Now, the school was actually in Persia, Assyria, which was, not too far northeast of Israel. And so, but they could have come from much, much farther, depending on where these Magi were from and what kingdoms that they represented. But now their gifts also give us a clue.
Was it from one particular country or several different?
At different countries. And that's something else too. It's we know there were 3 kings. There may have been even more countries that were represented there. We don't know. Now, verse 11 tells us they entered a house. Not the inn, not the stable, not the manger where Jesus was born. So obviously some time has passed from the time Jesus is born to the time that the Magi get there. And it also tells us that they saw the child with Mary, his mother. They did not see a newborn baby.
It could have been like 2 or something like that, right?
They didn't see even a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes. Okay. The Greek word here that got translated as child actually is the word for toddler. So by this time, Jesus wasn't even a baby anymore. He was walking around. He was a toddler. So he was over a year old already by the time that the wise men got there. And this is why when Herod didn't get the report back from them, time had passed, And he made the order to kill every baby boy in Bethlehem under the age of 2. So we know that Jesus was not yet 2, but he wasn't baby. Okay, wow, that changes the manger scene now. That's different. So you're going to have one of these every week. All right, the 3 gifts. So let's talk a moment about these gifts. We know what they are. Specifically tells us that the 3 gifts were gold, frankincense, and myrrh. We all know what gold is. The frankincense and the myrrh, you may not be as familiar with. If you're big into essential oils and stuff like that, you'll know frankincense because that's one of the essential oils that you can buy. Myrrh, not so much, because it's got a peculiar use. Gold is a gift that definitely is fit for kings. It's precious metal. It's known for its beauty, its shine, and its value. It's soft. It can be shaped into things. It's soft enough that you can actually cut a piece off and use that for smaller pieces of currency. It was something that would have been used in every kingdom for trade between kingdoms. Okay. Also, it's very practical in that it could be used to finance a ministry. Looking into the future there. Frankincense. It's an expensive fragrance of perfume made from the sap of trees where? India and Arabia. So that, like I said, the gifts kind of give us a clue of how far east some of these kings may have traveled from. So it could have been all the way from India. It was also used in worship so that they would lift their petitions to the gods. So incense that you would burn in an incense burner, that smell was thought to carry, the smell and the smoke was thought to carry the prayers to the heavens. Okay, so that's what this frankincense was.
Is that what in the Catholic Church?
Yeah, the incense burner that they have. Yeah.
Is that frankincense?
Yeah, I don't know if it's pure frankincense, but it's a cool smell. I enjoyed it, but I used to be Catholic. So
It is, and whenever I started using frankincense essential oil, it smelled that
I
smell.
know that smell. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yep. And then we've got myrrh. Myrrh is a specific kind of costly perfume made from rare thorn bushes in Arabia and Ethiopia, which is why usually in those traditional statues or pictures of the 3 wise men, you got a black one. And that's because one of those kings most likely was from Africa. Okay, because of this. And this myrrh was used as an antiseptic, anointing oil, and embalming fluid. Okay, Carla, what'd you say?
But Africa's not east.
No, but where was the star seen? Rising in the east. Okay, so and that's something that people get confused about when they think about they followed the star. They didn't. They followed the signs of the heavens, is really what it's saying. And the signs of the heavens showed all of this happening, rising in the east. The rising in the east with all of those conjunctions of planets and constellations and everything, that's what the sign was. But the new moon now being in the womb of the Virgin was where they knew they had to look, which means they had to travel west in order to get to Israel. Okay, that's the thing that a lot of times people try to use that as proof that the Bible's wrong. So if it was following the star in the east, why did they go west? That's wrong. It's error. The whole Bible's wrong. You can't be a Christian. So, but if they understood what it actually is saying, it makes perfect sense. Okay.
Aren't some of the oldest churches though are in Ethiopia, right?
Yeah. So Thomas, the Apostle Thomas,
Yeah.
actually was led by the Holy Spirit to go south as the rest of the apostles were going in different parts of the Roman Empire. He headed south and went to Ethiopia. And the reason why was Peter led the Ethiopian eunuch to the Lord. That Ethiopian eunuch was second to the Queen of Sheba. And so he would have taken Christianity down into Africa. And so, yeah, there is a very strong Christian presence even today in Ethiopia.
You know, that's
Some
one
of
of
the
the
old
places
cities.
that they claim. Who, Ethiopian claim that the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, so that's true. One of the places that the Ark of the Covenant might be, yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark, that one is in Ethiopia today. There's actually a temple that's under guard 24/7 by the Ethiopians. And they say that the Ark of the Covenant is in there and they won't let anybody in because they don't want their faces to melt off. We saw that on Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah. Yeah. So we don't know if it's really there or not, but that's what the Ethiopians claim. There's a huge church that's right there. So these gifts, they were meant to be diplomatic offerings, representative of each Magi's homeland, each kingdom that they came from. So they were expensive and they were suiting for the occasion, but they also had practical and deep spiritual meanings as well. So if you look at the gold points to Jesus's royalty. The frankincense points to his divinity, and the myrrh represents his humanity. Why? What's the myrrh used for? Embalming fluid. I've never seen embalming fluid as a gift at a baby shower. But that's really what has happened here. Yes, the myrrh was expensive. It's a very expensive gift to give, but its purpose actually was pointing to Jesus's life. The gold was used for his ministry. The frankincense points to his God in the flesh. And the myrrh most likely was some of the spices that the ladies were taking to the tomb Easter Sunday morning in order to anoint his body after the crucifixion. And I think Chuck is actually preaching on that, the tomb, this morning. So that's all I've got for you this morning. So do you have any questions about the wise men, not kings?
The names, what are they, I mean, are the names actually in scripture?
No, the names are not in the Bible. Those actually come from old Jewish traditions. There's other Jewish writings that didn't make it into the Bible. And so best we can do is say it's a tradition. I can't remember the names of them.
Well,
There's 3 of them though.
someone said one of the names, it sounds kind of like Melchior, actually.
Yeah, Melchior.
Yes.
Melchior is one.
Yes.
Balthazar
Yes.
is one. And I'm reaching back now. I don't remember.
So they could have come from several different areas and converged there.
Yeah, met each other along the way because they were all heading to the same place. Yeah. And of course, there's more. I did a whole lesson in the past just talking about astronomy and the signs in the sky at the time of Jesus's birth. And one of the biggest things is that there was a supernova that they would have been able to see when they were in Jerusalem, looking in the direction north to Bethlehem. And so they're thinking that they actually saw the supernova to know to go towards Bethlehem.
So on September 11th, which is 9/11, that right there.
That's why they knew to go to Israel.
Yes, but it was on 9/11.
That means nothing.
Oh, it does?
It means nothing.
Okay.
All right, so
Those dates you were given, that was before he was born.
yeah, so the calendar's all screwed up now. The Hebrew calendar was based on a 360-day year. And so, of course, now we know our calendar is 365.25. So we have to have leap years and all kinds of stuff. They didn't do that. And so by the time you get to Julius Caesar, he changed the calendar because Easter was falling in the winter and Christmas was falling in the summer. And so he had to adjust the whole calendar. And using calculations and stuff, they actually shifted everything by about 3.5 years. And so Jesus was 33 when he died, but he didn't die in 33 AD. He died about 30 AD, and he was born somewhere around 3 BC because the calendar got all shifted around by Julius Caesar, and then it got shifted again by Pope Gregory. So we went from the Julian calendar, which astronomers still use, to the Gregorian calendar, which is what we use today. So it's all messed up.
So
So you
the
get,
astrological records show, I mean, that's that time.
Yeah.
You know, so many years.
yeah, good questions.
A person being an atheist, even looking at the calendar, how can they get by the BC?
So somebody want to answer that? I've got the answer. What are they doing to BC now? BC is no longer BC. No, they're calling it BCE. BC is before Christ. So now it's BCE, which stands for before the common era. They've taken Christ out of the calendar.
Okay, I'm good with that, but why the change?
Because they don't want to acknowledge God, so they removed God.
I understand, but what caused the change? That we have a time up
The
to
year
something
zero.
and time after.
It's only Western Europeans and Americans and Latin Americans that use the new calendar. Hebrew still has their Hebrew calendar, which is now in year 7,000 something. And the Chinese, they've got their calendar too, which is somewhere 6,000 or 7,000 now.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so
Third year one.
Tom,
There's also a story that says this year, December 21st, you can see the Christmas star and the story behind it, planets lining up, Jupiter, and all of those lining up.
yeah. So the motion of the stars and the planets in the sky is circular. It happens again and again and again, but it all happens at different rates. Different planets are moving at different rates than others. And so in order to have these conjunctions happen again, it takes several thousand years. And so last year there was one huge conjunction, and they were actually advertising it as see the Star of Bethlehem. If you look in the night sky in this direction. So that's how it was actually advertised on the news and everything last year. And so this year it hasn't moved that far away from that. Yeah, it's cool stuff. Anything else? All right, cool. So I'll see you in worship in just a little bit.